Public Enterprises Minister Pravin Gordhan also saying that government is working on proposed measures to temporarily ban the sale of scrap metal in an effort to protect infrastructure. He's called for harsher penalties against those stealing things, including the infrastructure I've spoken about, cables and other forms of infrastructure. Joining us for this conversation is Economist Dr. Dick Vosland and Metal Recyclers Association chairperson Quintin Starkey. Good evening to both of you, and thank you so much for your time tonight. Dr. Vosland, this issue of cable theft has been with us for a long time now. It's just been growing over the years, and unfortunately it's moved from something that was seen as, you know, just a minor crime to very, very big and organized syndicates.
Yeah, no, of course, it can be very devastating for the economy also. It's like that these syndicates are stealing the ground that we are walking on, and it's become a sort of, yeah, we see from the floods in KZN, we see even how important the maintenance of the infrastructure is. And then if it's simply not there, if you take off the cables and sell copper and so on, then of course it has kind of devastating effect on the economy. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of like a short-term doping for those who do it, because eventually it will also hit them. It hits the whole of society. So it has to be taken care of course.
Business looking at the overall cost, not just of the theft of this infrastructure, but, you know, the indirect effect of whether it's not having electricity, not having trains that can move around to drop people off in time to get to work, that the cost to the economy is about over 7 billion rand. Why do you think it was that this problem was allowed to get out of control to the extent that it is now?
Well, I think with the growing mass unemployment in society and growing desperations, I think it's easier for those who organize this to get recruits and to get workers to do these jobs. I think we should consider or remember that not everybody is getting rich from this. I think it's a few organizers who get really rich, who get sort of make a living out of it, but for others it can just be a kind of a sustainable sort of to sustain yourself from day to day, so to speak. So growing desperation, mass unemployment in society, and then of course the opportunity also arises better if you have cut down in the policing and in the public sector. So we are living in a harsh austerity times also. And the police is being cut down, no matter what President Ramaphosa said in his SONA speech. You can look in the budget papers of the parliament, and you will see that the plan is to have 5,100 less police compared to 2021 in this year. So I think the only kind of industry that is prospering from this, aside maybe from scrap metal prices, which are not so it doesn't care who they buy from, but otherwise it's the private security industry. It will be a call for them to grow. Mm-hmm. So we are in austerity times and in times of desperation, and then people are using engage in all kind of survival activities. And it doesn't get better if the sort of the leaders of society or people who are regarded as leaders of society or officials also engage in another kind of looting, but not of physical things, but of money basically, because they have assets to that. And sure. I would even include the CEO of Sibanye Stillwater maybe. I think many things that to get 300 million rand over a year, that's also a kind of sort of looting of a company. Mm-hmm. So it's all over the place, and society is cracking up in its fault lines. We have the social fabric is cracking apart.
Quintin, let me bring you in here, because it's primarily the scrap metal industry that has been identified as being key in driving the theft of copper cable and other associated metals, and often we're told that these are due for export, that they don't even stay within the country's boundaries. As the Metal and Recyclers Association, your view on that, is that the right analysis for this problem?
Good evening, Kathy, to you and your listeners. As you rightly said, this is a very complex situation we're dealing with, and as the doctor rightly said, it's driven primarily by socio-economic conditions and climates that the country faces. But just to give you a background of who the MRA is and the function that we perform for our members and the industry, we are a 78-member strong member-based association with 150 yards nationwide. We represent about 80% of the market in terms of volume. The problem that we have is, and the MRA is a SAPS accredited association, meaning we need to meet certain requirements and standards from a SAPS perspective, and we regulate our members. And I use that word intentionally. We regulate our members in terms of the requirements that SAPS has for us, but we cannot police our members. And the problem that the MRA has is that, as I mentioned, we have 78 members, but there's a purported 3,500 registered dealers nationwide. Now, that is a task insurmountable from an association's perspective, and we can account for the dealings that our members do, and they adhere to a certain standard and requirement. But the balance of the dealers it becomes very difficult, and this is, again, a policing issue where, as the doctor rightly said, the policing sector is under severe pressure and, by the sounds of it, reducing in capacity, which is only going to exacerbate the problem. So what we need is a collaborative thinking of minds from all sectors, be it private sector, be it government, be it the industry. We need to come up with a collective solution to the problem and engagement. And to date, I'm sad to say, we have yet to be engaged with the minister around the issue. We have given our comments and thoughts around it, but the government refuses to engage the industry around the issue, and we welcome any engagement to be seen part of the solution rather than part of the problem.
Mm. The Minister Pravin Gordhan in Parliament yesterday talking about a temporary ban on the export of these metals, saying that he believes that that could be an efficient temporary measure to try and curb cable theft. What do you think the consequence of that will be?
So the consequences from an environmental perspective would be devastating on the country. You know, you're talking about a product that by volume is very minimal in terms of the globular picture of recycling in South Africa, legitimate trade. South Africa is a net exporter of scrap, meaning we produce more scrap than the local industry can consume. So a ban would be tantamount to an environmental problem that I think would far outweigh the current problem we have, where you would have car vehicles lying on the side of the road. You'd have low-value items being strewn over the country because there would be no offtake for that material, and the economic value would just deteriorate to an extent where it would just become uneconomically viable to recycle that material. So there's an estimated 3 million tons of scrap available in South Africa, and the local industry can only consume about 2 million tons of that, leaving 1 million tons of scrap. And in context, that's a large portion of scrap, which, if it's not ending up in the consuming industry, it's going to end up in landfill, and that's a very different conversation that needs to be had, and I don't think anybody wants to go down that road.
Dick, are there alternatives in as far as the kind of interventions that government can be thinking about when it comes to trying to curb this issue of theft?
Well, I'm not an expert in policing and these type of stuff, but I would imagine that if you would have officials kind of watching over these 150 plus scrapyard facilities over the country, and just kind of controlling what goes in and out from these facilities, that might help something. But I mean, at the root of the matter, I think is more like it is about in my view, the economic policy that is pursued, the fact that the public sector is drained of resources, even the police, but also when it comes to public sector jobs in general. And we have to do something about mass unemployment in the country, so that those who are organizing this and organizing kind of workers who maybe have been retrenched in these type of activities, that they will lose their labor force, so to speak, because people are busy building up instead of tearing down the infrastructure. So I think the issue of economic policy and harsh austerity, it must come into the picture. And if you think about kind of overseeing the scrap metal industry more sort of closely, well, then again, you need more resources to the public sector. You don't really want to outsource or put out another thing on tender again. You need the public sector officials to step in here, the police and SARS and so on. Maybe SARS has such resources because they are used to sort of make investigation at the borders of South Africa and what is going in or out. I don't know, but
Quintin,
we have to interview some other people about that.
Quintin, just on this issue of tightening regulations, it's been brought up before that perhaps what government needs to be exploring is, increasing regulations within the scrap metal industry itself, asking for greater controls in terms of where people are getting whatever it is, whatever metals it is that they're exchanging, especially cables, copper cables more specifically, asking, for some kind of quality certificate rather, that speaks to the quality of this product or even the history of where this product comes from. There's also been talk about, ending cash transactions and saying that perhaps could be the answer. I mean, do you think that any of this will actually work? So are these the right kind of solutions to the problems that the industry is faced with right now?
So the recycling industry is a highly regulated industry already. We have legislation, the Second-Hand Goods Act, which every dealer and recycler needs to register in order to trade legally. And everything that you have spoken about is catered for within that Second-Hand Goods Act. Just to give you a snippet of a paper trail, if somebody comes to a facility and wants to sell controlled metals, which is anything containing copper or anything to that effect, we need photographs of the material, we need ID documents of the person selling the material, we need weights of it, we need electronic documentation tracing that. So we are currently a highly regulated industry, and bringing more regulation in, I don't necessarily think is going to aid the problem. I think probably it would create more red tape. What would be better is better policing of the issue, where I may slightly disagree with the doctor is that the 150 yards are currently regulated through the MRA, by the MRA and through their membership. The other 3,000 yards that are operating, that are unassociated to any type of an accredited association, that's where people should target their inspections and ensuring that they're operating above board and in terms of the Second-Hand Goods Act. We as the MRA are already doing that with our members, and SAPS has the ability to access our membership database at any given time and see how we are regulating our members in terms of the Second-Hand Goods Act. So it's quite a difficult situation, and the enormity of it And it's going to take the buy-in of private sector. There's a very good example of the copperheads down in Cape Town, where they were very effective. The similar type of units need to be established countrywide with proper training, and that through that training and that we may be able to start getting ahead of the curve as far as theft of infrastructure is concerned. Just one other thing I'd like to bring to your attention, and it may sound us being a little bit on the defensive, but it is a fact and well documented that not all cable that is stolen is always destined for recycling and for scrap. There's a huge scourge in our society as far as illegal connections are concerned. And this is a different challenge that the police and governments are failing, and it's part of the problem. But what we want to be doing is, how can we come together to be part of the solution in trying to eradicate this issue? And the MRA, by the way, supports the notion of banning cash for scrap. It's something we've written to the government, to the department about, and we would be very happy to engage around that and promote that type of trade.